So as a quick introduction before the timer starts, so like I mentioned, Toastmasters has pathways. This is a level 4 project. It's an elective project. When you get to the higher levels, you have a lot of different things you can choose from. And I'm doing the presentation mastery pathway, one of 11 different pathways you can choose from. And this one is to create a podcast, which I did not expect to have this be something that I would do. And then it kind of just fell into my lap. So I am now going to transition from introducing myself as Toastmaster to introducing the introducing the podcast clip that I am going to share today. So this is the 2 to 3 minute part, Max. All right, so if you've been around here for more than a minute, which some of you guys have, and some of you are meeting me for the first time, you already know that the martial arts is a huge part of my life. It is a spectacular training ground for leadership, communication, personal growth, and life in general. I have also shared a time or two that I am one of those nerdy people that is super into Dungeons and Dragons. So our guests are getting a crash course in Stephanie today. So these two worlds have intermingled over the years, with our martial arts training giving us tools to create a better culture at the table while playing D&D, and experiences at the table connecting back to the martial arts in really fun ways. In particular, there is a lot of overlap between being a teacher in the martial arts and being a successful dungeon master at the table. Just under a year ago, one of my best friends, John, started a podcast. John is my favorite DM to play with and also happens to be the chief instructor of my martial arts school. Fun fact, we both started training in July of 1998. So he was 5 and I was 12 years old. So it was a little while before we actually crossed paths, but suffice it to say, we have known each other a very long time. His podcast is called Dragon Mind. And to quote the description, Dragon Mind is a TTRPG discussion podcast where we look through the infinite lenses of TTRPGs to discover our best selves through gaming. Quick note, TTRPG is nerd speak for tabletop role-playing games. As I've listened over the last 9 months to the podcast, I could hear the potential for some amazingly deep and meaningful conversations about leadership, communication, and life. I could hear the need for a voice that would ask John the right kind of questions to unlock those deep ideas and connections he's looking to explore. So, like I often do, I raised my hand and said, "Pretty please, can I play?" And thus, Dragon Mind Borrowing Brilliance was born. My role is to add structure, bring in outside influences I've read, heard, or experienced, and to create the space for John to shine and have the conversations he's excited about. He's still going to do episodes with others that dive into the weeds because there is a value to that, all the technical stuff behind D&D. But what we've begun is an ongoing series within his already existing podcast that will borrow brilliance from outside sources like Cal Newport, Dave Ramsey, Anne Lamott, Buddha, Marcus Aurelius, anything and everything that can inspire us to create more positive experiences at the table and in our day-to-day lives. So we have 5 episodes recorded so far. The following is an opening from episode number 2, technically, but the first one was kind of a pilot. So this is kind of episode 1, episode 2. So I need to share my screen so I can play it for y'all on Spotify. All right, I'm assuming y'all can see it, and let me know if this doesn't work.
This show is part of the Darkmoor Podcast Network.
To join our community Discord or see more content from our members, visit darkmoorpodcasts.com.
Hello, everyone. I'm John.
And this is Stephanie.
And welcome to Borrowing Brilliance, a new segment of Dragon Mind.
In this segment, we borrow brilliance from some of the world's most insightful minds, using their ideas to better ourselves as game masters, players, and people.
In today's episode, we discuss the 7 baby steps of game mastering, from what to do about running your first session, all the way to becoming a masterful, game master. So without further ado, let's get started. for each of these Borrowing Brilliance segments, since we're crystallizing this format a little more so than we did in our pilot, you had a few starter point topics you wanted to hit, right?
Yeah. It was mostly to lead in today's topic that we were going to talk about, the question that I challenged you with. But yeah, I mean, what came out of the first one was just the fact that this segment we think is going to work best. This segment of Dragon Minds is where we're standing on the shoulders of giants in the spirit of Sir Isaac Newton and exploring big topics through the lens of minds greater than our own. And like we talked about in the first episode, this is D&D, just like the martial arts, is just a metaphor for ways we can grow to be a better human. Even when we're running around, in a fantasy world with swords and shields and firing fireballs at each other and everything, we can still learn and grow through the experience and the expression, the creative expression. So the brilliance for today's podcast is actually going to be twice borrowed. And I'm going to give the whole preamble for where it came from, because this is Borrowing Brilliance. And I want to give credit where credit is due, and maybe even hopefully inspire someone to go read an awesome book and grow and change their life for the better, maybe. So this topic originally comes from Dave Ramsey, who's a financial counselor and an entrepreneur and a best-selling author and radio and podcast host and all of those things. There's a lot of opinions on his philosophies around finances, but he's best known for his 7 baby steps to financial freedom, which are very Googleable if anyone is interested that's listening right now. While I've heard of Dave Ramsey before, I was actually listening to a Cal Newport podcast, and that's what led me to this. So Cal Newport's podcast is Deep Life, and he is the author of Deep Work, So Good They Can't Ignore You, Digital Minimalism, and several others. And his really big thing is slow productivity. So actually giving yourself the time to have deep thoughts and do deep work, and then through that, be your best self, in your contribution to the world while not feeling stressed out. And someone called into his podcast, referenced Dave Ramsey's 7 baby steps, and asked Cal Newport what his 7 baby steps of deep work would be. And then something you said on our first pilot podcast, our first Borrowing Brilliance segment of this podcast, sparked my little light bulb to pass the same question on to you. So the challenge I gave you was, what would you say are the 7 baby steps to becoming an awesome DM? So that was the challenge. And now, to set this up, I am no longer going to be Stephanie, because Stephanie is still pretty sure that she's not interested in being a DM. I love being a player, but I am not at all confident enough yet to be a DM. Maybe someday. So today, I'm going to be, I'll be Michelle today. And I've been playing for years, and I'm really starting to get that itch to DM, and the voice in my head is saying very loudly that I can do this better, and I'm ready. So I see what you're doing, John, as a DM, and I have my own ideas and improvements on what I would like to do. So I'm ready to go all out. I'm like, I see your homebrew world. I want to create my own. I have some really, I have thoughts on what I want to do for rules and how I want to set stuff up. Maybe bring in some interesting different races or fun things like that. Maybe allow some funky subclasses or something. I'm ready to add my own spice to everything because I think I could do it better. That's one of the reasons a lot of DMs start, is because they think, they got ideas. They think they could do it better. So I'm pumped up to go all in, but I do have you as my guide. So you're going to try to convince me, Michelle, to follow your 7 baby steps.
Cool. So this is the part where I feel like if this was like an 80s PSA, I'd be like, whoa, hold on there, Michelle, because things aren't as simple as they seem. But no, for real, I think one of the benefits to having baby steps leading up to a strong DMing experience really comes from something I've observed over and over and over again from new DMs that get really excited. And the hard part is I genuinely don't want to quash that excitement. It's more just chunking the experience. So it's something that you build over time, as opposed to thinking that you're just going to dive in and start a 4-year-long levels 1 through 20 campaign that in your head is epic and amazing, when in reality there are a lot of speed bumps and warts that don't always get pointed out right away. So the first thing is, I've also had these stumbling blocks. I have not followed my own advice to easing into DMing. I've only through retrospect seen kind of what this path looks like from stumbling around a little bit, also helping a lot of other DMs, not Michelle, but Stephanie's son, Leo, start learning how to DM. And even as a 9-year-old, his sessions that he's run have been highly successful, not because there are a lot of complicated rules, but mostly because first, he's just aware of the player's experiences. So that's not a baby step in and of itself, but I do think that a lot of times DMs start from the place that you're starting, Michelle, which is being a player and thinking, I can do this better. The other one simply being nobody else is willing to do that work. And that is something I want to make apparent right away, is that DMing is work. It's highly rewarding, highly meaningful work, but it's not something that you just throw together and that guarantees a good time. One of the things I did realize, though, is for every highly effective experience in terms of DMing, whether if I was a player in somebody else's custom world or for players in my custom world I was adjudicating as the DM, they did generally follow this progression, and it was something that was slowly built over time. And there are some reasons why the 7 baby steps we've crystallized, really, it's kind of best to go in that order. And that when you skip steps, a lot of times you end up stumbling in unexpected ways because you haven't done the experiential work ahead of time in really making sure you kind of know what you're doing.
I think so far it all makes sense. I mean, I'm Michelle. I'm still very excited. So I'm listening. Just like maybe some people are listening to this podcast. I am listening and I'm trying to be open, but I'm really excited to play, my game that I have in my head. I have so many ideas in my head, John, and I just want to see them come out into the world. And I'm pretty sure it's going to be pretty easy because it's so clear in my head. So it can't go that wrong at the table, can it?
Well, yeah, it can. And it always will. All
right, so I'll cut it off there. So thank you guys for listening. And for our guests, this is a little bit of an atypical project. Usually it's a 5 to 7 minute speech. So this one's a little different, but that is what I had to share with you guys today. And hopefully you got a little bit of a sneak peek. I had a hard time picking a clip, but I want to try to find something as representative as I could of the fact that we're bringing in outside elements, and also that Dungeons and Dragons can be a really cool way to develop yourself as a person. It has a lot of stereotypes around it, but there can be a lot of really neat benefits in self-exploration.